Alrighty. Well, thank you. I want to introduce everybody to Scott Maxwell. Scott, UTSC grad. What year?
2008, I think.
2008. All
Yeah,
right.
well, now with COVID, if every year feels like 10, so if you go back that far, that seems like 50 years ago.
It's like dog years now,
Yeah,
isn't it? Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, it is. It's absolutely crazy. Yeah, well, Scott and I are beginning an interaction as we got chatting. Scott told me he was a UTSC alumnus, and he's got a fascinating job now with Wounded Warriors, which we want to talk about in a bit. But I thought, wow, wouldn't it be great to have Scott come and just chat with some of you guys, all of you guys who are now going through psychology, and to hear what it's like a little bit down the road. So he's the ghost of Christmas future or something like
Yeah, really
that. So
true.
fantastic, Scott. So yeah, maybe just give me some stories of UTSC in the day. Give us a sketch of what it was like then.
Yeah, like it was interesting because I grew up in Bowmanville, which is not too far east down the
Yeah.
401, and I wanted to go to the University of Toronto, and I wanted to stay on campus in first year, no matter if I lived at went if I went downtown or stayed in Scarborough. But I ended up staying on going into those little residential houses there. There was an old student center that looked like a little one level little white
It's
house.
still there.
Is it
Yeah.
still there? And I
Yeah.
so we that were so I thought I kind of fell in love with that whole vibe of there's deer out there, and I grew up in the cottage country, and the summer is up on Perry Sound, in addition to living in Bowmanville, and I just love that kind of thing, that feel. So
Yeah.
immediately I walked onto this campus going, this is the University of Toronto. I had such a different view of U of T by the downtown lens that I walked on the Scarborough campus, and I went, saw that house and saw the deer and saw the little townhouses behind it, and said, like, I can get downtown easily to go and enjoy downtown, but this
Yeah.
is where I would like to live if I'm going to live and go to school. So I ended up staying there. I could go home on weekends and do laundry. And I just kind of, the six guys, six gals, six guys, six gals, that how the whole thing was constructed, how
Yeah.
much fun it was. I had the most incredible set of roommates, one from South Africa, one from Yellow, from the Yukon, like just this amazing, they did a good job of separating us in terms of what we were, the courses we were taking and so on. It just was, from the second I walked in there, an amazing experience from the campus, the way it was laid out. It kind of sucked. There was no pub on. We missed having no pub on. Is there a pub there now? No.
There is a pub, but it's been an interesting story there too, because of course we're so multicultural, and so many of our students, you start to realize after a while that going to the pub is a very European
Yes.
descent
Oh, for
thing
sure.
to do. And so for a lot of our students, that just isn't, it's
Yeah.
just not something they think about. And so getting one going, we now have something called Rex's Den, which is nice because it is sort of a pub, but it's also very culturally sensitive, I think. So it's got bubble teas as well, as so anything you'd like to have, and it tries to be a place for all the students to get together. My band's been fortunate to play on the stage there a couple times. They
Well,
have a little stage, so yeah.
yeah, I mean, that was one thing that didn't have. And so we'd walk down to that little place in the corner there, like Morningside, and there was a little gas station on the corner. There used to be a pub back in there, and they would just basically cater to the campus.
It was a British one, like a
But yeah,
Fox and something, or
it was actually working fine. So, but really, we just ended up hanging out in each other's different, because the lifestyle of the housing was so different from a lot of where my friends were going.
yeah,
Jammed into these very mass kind of student housing like structures, not a lot of privacy, not a lot of space to congregate. And
yeah.
that was the opposite at Scarborough. So we would all hang out in our big, townhouse things, and just kind of walk from one to the other. And just, anyway, it was an amazing experience. I remember going into the campus and, you know, um, walking along those long kind of hallways with the glass on the one side, concrete kind of feel to it. And then you go in, and the lecture halls are all built into the back end or the middle of the building. It was just a really cool kind of vibe to it. I had never had a bad day there. I loved my experience. And
So did you go to classes as well, or was it just mostly having fun with?
well, first year, that's an interesting story, because I was pretty good. I mean, I was pretty good. I really did. I was excited because I was the last cohort. I think I was the last cohort, or one shy of the last cohort of OAC,
Ah,
grade
yes,
13. So by
yes.
the time it hit, I was ready to go to university. I had a lot of fun in high school. I was 19 years old. So I had been through the 19 birthday. Like I was ready to go and start. I was done with high school. I was ready for that next thing. So
Yep.
getting there, I was certainly more interested in beginning to immerse myself into not, not academics as a whole, but just to start being in those lecture theaters and having these kind of, I was, moving on from the high school kind of curriculum and
Yep.
getting on to much things that are a lot more in depth. And so I think I was lucky. I mean, my sister-in-law is a first year COVID student trying to go to Queens, and she's not even 18 because she's a December birthday. So
Right.
I can't imagine what that would be like for her. So I think it's all about where you are. And we were just ready to go. That group of students, I felt were like, okay, we're done with this. Let's get in here and start. But we had a lot
Yep.
of fun. I mean, as I was saying to you earlier, I took on the whole concept, I was ready to go to university, but I
Yep.
had no idea what I wanted to take or what I wanted to do with it.
Yeah.
So I took 5 intro, whatever they were, 100 or 1000 level courses, whatever it was.
Yep.
And I took anthropology, economics, geography, philosophy, and political science. And
Hmm.
that was I did not have, in the social sciences realm, I had not the slightest clue what I wanted to do. And it really began to take hold after that pretty quick.
I was going to say, is that a bad? So one of the things I sometimes talk with students about is this combination of planning versus, I guess, letting the game come to you. Like, to some extent, I say I went in with a plan, but I didn't follow the plan. I had a plan, but yeah. So any sort of thoughts on that? How you
Like
balance?
I think I really, I was confident enough to know that I needed to figure out things and try to find a stream that I wanted to pursue and enjoy, but
Yeah.
I wasn't forcing it, if that makes sense. I mean, it's a delicate balance. You got to make decisions on courses ahead of the game. You got to pay for these things. I mean, I understand that, but
Yeah.
I tried to set it up in such a way that I could allow myself some flexibility to not have to say, as in whatever, an 18 going on 19-year-old kid coming out of Bowmanville High School, that I'm going to be this unequivocally. I
Yeah.
said, I'm going to try these things. I'm probably going to like a bit of each. And that was the case, but I'm not going to be, I can't, go in every one of these fields. I'm going to find one that I want, kind of pursue it in year two, and then look to really cement that in year 3, 4, or however many years you go on to be in education after that. And that was the plan I took, and then allowed me to have some fun, take a bit of pressure off those early days, still remain focused, still, try to figure it out, but not under the gun, as it were, and just allowed me to, get a bit of everything out of the whole experience of university.
I know some of my students will hear that and say, "Oh, so you didn't have your parents tell you
Yeah.
or decide for you you're going to become a doctor or a lawyer," or many of them have that pressure on their shoulders.
I can say honestly, I did not have that pressure. I mean, my parents really guided me. They were thumb on a lot of the way through when I was an adolescent and youth. And then it was okay. They really believed with my sister and I, who ended up going to Carleton and New York, and
Yeah.
now works at Amazon in California, was,
Yeah.
let it get us to a point and then kind of say, you need to be responsible for these things, and we're going to give you a hand up and not a hand out, and you're going to go and try to figure this out on your own. And I think that helped us a lot.
Yeah.
You start to own the pressure and
Yeah.
own, your own circumstances. It's freedom on one hand. At the same time, if you are serious as an individual on what you want to be and what you want to do and what you want to accomplish in life, for me, that was more pressure than anything my parents ever did. So
Yeah.
that's my
Cool.
personal experience.
I also know I don't want to look ahead because we're going to get there, but I know where you've kind of ended up, and I have a sense of what drives you now. And so let's just kind of think. So you did your first year, you kind of did all this stuff. Anything about that sort of process of how did you find what grabbed you? Any experiences you remember that really kind of lit you up and carried your
Oh,
path? Yeah.
absolutely. I mean, I loved anthropology. I loved because I love social science. And to me, nothing better describes social science than anthropology. I mean, the science, the evolution of everything, human oriented on this planet, mixture with how humans interact. I mean, it was perfect for me. One of the cool parts of that program back then was they gave you a year membership to the zoo, to the Toronto Zoo. So I would go and study primates, and I just loved the whole thing. And
Yeah.
then, but then it quickly became too much math, and you're too. And I still count with my hands, so you can imagine that's not good for Scott, and it was not. So I quickly had to pivot out of that and move off from anthropology, despite how much I was going to enjoy it. I was not going to succeed in a 4-year term. It just didn't interest me on the math side. So then I was in. Then I was in the poli. Sorry, I should have said political science. So one of those 5 courses was political science,
Yeah.
and I really started to take to a couple of the professors just the material. I was always kind of interested in government. I was volunteering heavily in my own riding in Durham riding, which is what
Cool.
the Clarington Bowenville encompasses, Durham riding federally, which is now the home of the leader of the official opposition for Canada, Aaron O'Toole,
Yeah.
who lived next door to me coincidentally the whole time. So
Cool.
so I had this anthropology stream. I went on to take a bit of psychology throughout when I shifted to take poli-sci. So I was really captured by the psych piece,
Yeah.
mixed with the political science, how how the whole society works and how its behaviors translate into elections. And then for me, there wasn't a galvanizing point though, where it was like, this is going to be the way that it is.
Mhm.
That didn't happen at university. That point happened for me by being involved in the community.
Yeah.
So I do believe in, not just becoming so fundamentally immersed in academics or university life or school life. I was able, because I lived close to home, to still be home and take on community-based initiatives. So I got involved in the local riding association for what was at that time the Federal Liberal Party, because I was pretty captivated by Paul Martin at the time.
Yeah.
And I ran into my grade 8 music teacher at the 7-Eleven downtown. And this was in like second year or something. And he said, "What are you doing?" He said, "Well, I think I'm going to go down the stream of poli-sci, really like it. Good profs. I'm interested in it." He said, "Why don't you come out to our next riding association meeting?" I had no clue what he was talking about. He brought me out to a riding association meeting in the riding. And quickly I walked into a room that was full of, I was the youngest member of the group by about 60 years. They were handing me, "Do you want to be the president, treasurer, CFO? Do you want to run the next?" Anyway, I just basically had everything at my disposal. So I thought, well, why don't I try this to see if the practical element of politics in our communities actually meets the academic part of politics at the university. So that was the galvanizing moment for me to say, I actually want to do something that I can feel very practical about in the social sciences.
Yeah.
And there
So,
was my
so I love that example, and I want to kind of zoom in on something because I'm always harping at my students about a couple of things we'll come to. And so one of them is this notion of being able to interact well with other human beings. So collaboration skills, communication skills. I talk about critical thinking. I talk about creative thinking. These are all very important for me, and I try to instill that in him. And I imagine, that moment of, if I put myself in my students' minds, so this person says, "Hey, come on out into this room full of strangers who, by the way, are not your age and probably know way more about what's going on there than you do, and so you have to come in as a young sort of newbie in today's world." And I suspect sometime between that moment and the moment when they started making all these offers to you, you somehow found a way to interact with these people in important ways, and that's probably critical to what comes after that.
That's right. I felt hugely uncomfortable, but I felt that it was much as a room for me to speak, because we were talking about elected government and the political process, as someone that was, my grandparents' age. And so, you just kind of go into that understanding where you're at in the room and the conversation, but comfortable enough to offer that you're there to give them a hand. You're there to offer some insights that you have to the political process that maybe they have long forgot about, as people that are three times your age or whatever it is.
Yep.
And they just quickly warm to it, and they, never going in there presuming anything or trying to say I'm right and you're wrong, but I want to be part of the conversation. I think there's elements I can bring to the conversation. I want to listen to everything that you have done here as people that have built this little riding association organization. Just make everybody's voice value. And they quickly made my voice valuable at the table. It always helps if you have someone in your corner.
Yeah.
I didn't necessarily walk in cold. I was there with my grade 8 music teacher who was the president of the Writing Association, who introduced me, but that also put me on the spot to say something. So anyway, all that to say that, yeah, you do need to step outside your comfort zone. To me, that I can, I think that is often missing in academics right from the get-go. This is
Yeah.
not a slight at university at all, but yeah.
It's okay, Scott. Sorry. Thank you. Cool. I don't know. We probably won't edit this out because I don't know. I like to keep it real.
Perfect.
I'm lucky to get tea delivery this time of day.
Oh, I love it. Fantastic. Well,
Very spoiled.
yeah, so just being I was cognizant always of trying to, I'm a big practical type of person. I like to take some things that can be seen as abstract or, in the books, and try to hit the main street with it. And that's what I wanted to do. So I found this opportunity through a meeting at a 7-Eleven, and I decided I was interested in poli-sci on campus. And I thought, well, I'm going to give it a shot anyways of seeing if the two will meet, and they did.
Yeah. And what do you, I mean, just for fun, let's say it didn't work. You walked into that room and it didn't work. Not such a huge deal, right? I mean, when it works, it's potential opportunities. It
We're
can
all
change your life.
volunteers. We're all volunteers. Everybody in the room is a volunteer. That's how riding associations work nationally. So in Canada, and so I didn't go in with any expectation, any doubts, if I didn't like it, I would just not go back. But yeah, so just, it wasn't a risk. It was just stepping outside of your comfort zone, and those are two very different things.
What I think that's a critical. I like that highlight right there, because I think it's an opportunity with really no, like, any of these things are opportunities with no risk. If you go in at the worst, you're going to have gotten some practice trying to network and learn some strategies that you might not want to repeat in the very worst.
Right.
And in the best case scenarios, things open up for you, and suddenly it becomes a lot of fun, and you get rewarded for taking that little bit of a risk. So
Right.
I think that's a great story.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what are you doing now? Let's
Well, how what I'm doing now kind of does carry me through my time at UTSC. So I decided to do the specialist program in poli-sci that
cool.
that UTSC has. That's where I decided to focus the remainder of my time on their international relations, focus on international relations and Canadian public policy. That was I went all into that. And I continued to be very active in the community. So I started to I started to manage campaigns in the federal elections back then. And
as a student, you were doing this.
As a student, I was doing that. So I would run campaigns, and full disclosure, I was still in university, and I did that. And part of it was, the other part of me, what I know it's top of mind to young people nowadays, because I graduated into the Great Recession. Of 2008, and I've been living through the recession that just started to rid itself, and then before a global pandemic. So these are tough times for young people. So I really realized, okay, if this is going to happen, I'm going to go the social sciences route, being a practical person. How am I going to make this pay? How am I going to get a job out of this? How am I going to transfer this social science knowledge into Main Street every day, owning a house, living normally like you want to do in time post secondary. So I wanted to network and start meeting people and putting myself, getting my name known into the in the members of parliament within the east part of the Greater Toronto area where I was living and working. And so I did that. I met a politician back then whose name was Dan McTagg. He was the minister of, he would go on to be, at the time, he was the minister of consular affairs. So the Paul Martin government did something very rare. Not normally is there's usually just a minister of foreign affairs or now global affairs, but he actually constituted a minister for consular affairs because there were so many Canadians detained back then abroad. And so part of what I was hoping to do was become maybe a diplomat or be involved in the global affairs foreign service program. So I said to Dan all along the way, because he was certainly the foremost minister in these ridings of which I was running campaigns in, that I'm coming up on graduation soon. I'm coming up on graduation soon. You need to hire me. You need to hire me. So I just kept bothering him and bothering him. And back then with BlackBerry, I don't know if you recall, Steve, they used to have pins. Remember the pins? I would hit him all the time and say, my countdown to graduation. And anyway, it worked out wonderfully. I graduated, and I first job I had was as a policy advisor to him, Dan McTagg.
Cool.
And I packed all my stuff up, and my first job was walking up the front doors of Center Block of Parliament Hill.
Yeah.
And from there, so that was that. And then the whole mental health piece.
Let's hang on there for a second, because I think you're saying there's a lot of gems in what you're saying, and I want to just kind of unpack some of them. One of them, we mentioned earlier that a lot of the students at UTSC come knowing what they're going to be and how they're going to live, because it's been sort of downloaded upon them that this is the goal. And so I would like them all to just I want to just reemphasize this other path you took, which was focused mostly on what fed your soul, for lack of a better word. What do I enjoy learning, even to the point of pivoting out of anthropology when it involved things you didn't enjoy, but ultimately politics is what you enjoyed. And then you found a way to monetize that, much like Facebook did what they want to do and then monetized it after the fact. So this is another path of, really being what I call open to resonance. What resonates with you? What makes you feel like I want to learn more about that? I want to do more about that. And if you can find that, that's probably what you'd love your life to be sort of around. And then if you can find a way to do the financial stuff, because as you said, you got to be practical. I mean, houses are not freebies. They cost a lot of money.
Neither is education generally free.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I wanted to come out. I worked at General Motors on the line through university as well, in Oshawa, because I had an opportunity to get in there as a summer student, and I worked, and I added a year of my education. I went on to do 5 years at UTSC versus 4, because I took 4 courses instead of 5 a semester, so I could work 2 or 3 days. Yeah, so I could work 2 or 3 days a week. So I think you just don't. I guess all of that is to say that, like, I didn't make everything just about my 5 courses in a semester, and that was my life. I love that. I enjoyed parts of it. I really, I got my first year fun, and all that was had. But I wanted to do a lot of things at the same time that found a way to make some money while I was in university. Find a way to maybe monetize what I was able to do in university, coming out of university, and also being civically engaged and active outside of the academic environment. All 3 of those things were happening simultaneously over my 5-year period.
And the other thing I heard in what you were just saying that I think is really important is being able to pitch yourself. The only path to a job is not necessarily, waiting for some job to open up and putting in a formal application and then winning an interview. That's the most common thing. Even then you have to pitch yourself at the interview, but you being, a little more proactive and saying, hey, I kind of know the right players. First of all, you said I went out there and networked. I got involved in these things so that I could be in association and rubbing elbows with these people. And I think, so many students now, social anxiety is huge, and the idea of going into a room full of strangers, which is why I highlight it, is really difficult. But I think you would agree, and I would certainly agree, it's been a key to us being able to live the lives we want to live, is being willing to step into that, which is still uncomfortable for me. Put me in a room full of strangers. I know what to do. I know some strategies. I know it'll be fine in half an hour once I've been in it for a while. But for those first 5 or 10 minutes, you have to kind of realize that's part of the path to getting where you'd like to be.
Yeah, and for sure. And I always like to joke that I've never actually had an interview for a job in my life.
Interesting.
It's all been through not just who I knew, in that I'm going to get a job because of who I knew. Right. It was the other way around. Is I was getting work thrown at me because of what they knew I was able to do.
Yeah.
Because I was putting myself out there visibly to say, oh, if you need a campaign manager, you want to hire Scott. If you want someone that's going to be very good working in your office as a member of parliament, and seeing the work I was putting in to get there, I want to hire someone like that. I mean, those were coming my way, and those situations were happening because of my effort, not because of, there was no silver spoon. It had nothing to do with anybody who knew anybody in my life. I literally realized I was going to go out there and have to earn everything that I was ever going to obtain.
So when you say effort, I'm curious about this too. So you said 2 different things in slightly different ways. So one of them is people started to get to know, oh, this is the guy you want. yes, that might have been effort. He'll put in the work, but I bet it was also results, some creative thinking, some critical thinking stuff you've been able to do that impressed other people and thought, oh, this dude knows what he's doing.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, the time, I was willing to drive up to Uxbridge in the middle of winter to sit through a 2 hour riding association meeting, and people respect
Yeah,
young people that are willing to maybe do things that other young people in their eyes aren't doing. Putting time. I mean, this isn't going to happen over Zoom. I mean, those kind of physical social interactions aren't going to happen over Zoom. This isn't the new
yeah,
normal for that. That you're still going to need to interface. And I always enjoyed interfacing with people. I love talking to people. I love having conversations in person. So that part of it came easy to me. But I still had to drive to Uxbridge. I
yeah,
still had to do that instead of going out to the movie that night or going to the hockey game, that whatever the case may be. I did give up a lot of time of my time that I could be doing anything with to pursue a bit of an end state and a passion that I love.
yeah.
And then combine that with, yeah, you run elections, you engage on things. I'm a person that wants to do it right and make sure that, if we aren't successful, we did everything we could to be. And if we are successful, then we did everything we could to be successful, and it worked out. But at the end of the day, you want to do it right. You want to be organized. A lot of the skills that I was being taught in university on time management, on the micro skills of reading of large volumes of work and putting it down into 2 pages. I mean, there's tons of transferable skills in university that I was bringing over into what I was doing in the community as it was happening, and then just honing that with some of, I guess, my own personal skills that I was bringing to the mix.
Yeah, yeah, and that, I mean, I'll just react, that authenticity of purpose. We could say it that way, but by following where your heart really was as you were going through university, now you are doing the 2 hours to drive to Uxbridge because that is a reflection of what you really care about, and that shows through. And I think that's what people need as the first level of trust. If does this person really care about the work they're doing? If they
Yeah.
do, wow, I feel more comfortable they're going to try to do a great job.
Well, and what a place to start if you're trying to get to know somebody. Someone that's willing to put the effort in, that's coming at it genuinely. I wasn't just coming at it. I was to be there to look for a job. I was there to try to make the organization better, try to make the riding association better, try to win a campaign, try to do everything I was doing. And but not being naive enough to think that if you do these things right, it's not going to benefit you down the road when you might need it. And that's really ended up happening for me. And next thing you know, I'm getting a pass to roam around Parliament Hill as my first job out of university in a great recession. So I was thinking, talk about positive reinforcement. It was
Yep.
happening for me personally, saying, okay, now when I think back about how I was grimacing, doing a lot of these things and going, why am I doing this? And I'm not with my buddies that night.
Yeah.
This is pretty cool. I just walked through the front doors of Center Block to go work in the Library of Parliament, to go write up a policy statement that's going to go in the House of Commons this afternoon. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, there you go. So that was my journey to federal government, and then had some great times. My goodness, working on some amazing files. Talk about learning skills and juggling everything at once. And
How much did you do all by yourself, or how much of what you accomplished did you accomplish as a group?
what's that in Ottawa?
Yeah, in terms of, the things you're proudest of, let's say, this is something I did or I was part of, how much of your successes do you think you were able to accomplish all by yourself, or how much came from your ability to work with others in order to,
Geez, I would say the vast majority of my success in terms of where I've been able to go on this professional journey has been the ability to work with others, the
yeah,
ability to step outside of your comfort zone as an individual and assert yourself in a meeting, walk into a room where you're not comfortable with, do good things, put the hard work in. I mean, everyone always looks for the silver bullet, this magic philosophical term about life and career development, excuse me, and so on. I just did an interview with another on this very topic not long ago, and I just said I was instilled with hard work as a value principle.
yeah,
That if you outwork, your peers, if you outwork a process, that others are engaged in similarly, you're going to tend to come out on top. And it's not always rocket science. And And if you and managing and working within people is a phenomenal skill set that doesn't come out of academics or any book or anything in the world. You got to get in there and kind of get a bit muddy with it and figure it out,
Yeah.
and make everybody feel part of the solution and part of the team, and never above anybody else. That whole lateral integration, all these fundamental core management principles that you just kind of, you got it. As I say to everybody, whether you're worried about what your first job is, whether that's at Starbucks or Tim Hortons or McDonald's, or you're unemployed. I would take McDonald's or Starbucks or Tim Hortons any day, because I don't think young people can start to learn how to manage and work within people
Yeah.
fast enough, because it is so complex and complicated, especially probably now more than ever before.
Yeah, I bring that up because, of course, one of the love hates of university is group work, where faculty members like me
Yeah.
love to force students to work in groups, and students, first of all, always want to be in groups with their friends, and I say no, that's not the idea. The idea is
Oh, I
to,
remember doing the group
be with
work
these
and
people.
laying out in the hallways on campus at UTSC, and one person or two always invariably ended up doing all the work. And I mean, you
Yeah,
know, I I remember those days. But if in principle it not, I guess, forced you, but it forces you to get out of comfort zone environments that I think a university is really all about. I mean, if you university, what a place to learn and meet people from all around the world,
yeah.
engage with other people from different backgrounds and cultures, do group work and talk about critical things. Like I can't, it's what university is all about. It's at its core.
Yeah, I agree. And let me just echo for the students at a place like UTSC. There's clubs of all sorts, including probably 5 that you would find interesting. I would suggest take a risk, or go into a club and don't bring a friend with you. just say I'm going to go and join, and worst that happens, I leave the club. No big deal.
This is
Best that happens, I make 5 new friends that I may have for the rest of my life, and one of them might give me a job when I retire, or when I need one. You just don't know.
Yeah, you don't know where life's going to lead you. And if I hadn't have met my grade 8 music teacher and went to that little kind of dinky riding association meeting, and I was like, wow, this is politics on the ground. That's not what I'm learning in the classroom. This is wild. And then carried on the pursuit of both the community approach, the outward approach into the community, and also the academics. I wouldn't have ended up going to Parliament Hill. And that's where I really became immersed in the whole war in Afghanistan. And a high school, one of my closest friends in Afghanistan was killed by a roadside bomb in 2007, who, Joel went on to looked at me next when I was sitting in the auditorium of my high school back then, and said, I'm going to join the military and go over and fight against this kind of terror, and it ended up costing him his life. And then I'm watching that unfold on TV, sitting in my house while I'm in university, and then working in Ottawa. And then that led to the shift and paying attention to veterans issues. The new Veterans Charter was coming in when I was working on the Hill, and just realized there's a lot of big things missing in Canada when it comes to the treatment psychologically of those that serve our country. And then led me to a couple of different people that had started this Sapper Mike McTagg Wounded Warrior Fund, it was named after Dan, my boss's nephew, Mike, who was blown up by a roadside bomb in Afghanistan in 06. And here you go, which turned the page, if you will, to the next chapter of my life. But what a pathway to that point, if you think of it.
Wow, I can't. I mean, my full disclosure, my dad was in the military, and so I know that sort of military life reasonably well. I was brought up a CFB Gagetown, basically, army brat from youth, and yeah, I mean, when some people who've lost family members, I don't know, it makes it real in a different way. And if it was your buddy, would you like to just say his full name so
Yeah,
we can?
Darrell Caswell was his name. Born and raised in Bowmanville, just a buddy of mine in high school, as you would have. All hung out together, all kind of did the same thing. He was a year older than I was, and I remember vividly the time when he said he was going to join. Back then, prior to 9/11, it was kind of, the military was a bit of a joke in Canada. It was, reservists, or the volunteer part-time soldiers, would not wear their uniforms to the regiment from their houses. They would take it there and change. There was just that lack of respect for service in Canada. And I remember feeling really guilty after well, certainly when he was in the height of it in Afghanistan, and he knew what was going on back then in '06. It was a bad time.
Yeah.
And then ultimately when he was killed, thinking, wow, the way that we perceived his intention to serve Canada when he said he was going to join the military after 9/11, all of us, you're going for the free education, all this kind of stuff. It just led me to believe. And then, of course, thinking, my goodness, how could a war in Afghanistan that far away from a little town of Bowmanville, Ontario, meet in a tragedy like that? And here I was wanting to study foreign affairs and global affairs and consular issues. I'm going to start paying attention to this. And that's what I did. And so
following the passion again.
Following the passion again, just went with emotion, the gut, and a little bit of experience. And then, so I started to pay attention to this little fund that was helping send comfort items to our troops who were injured in theater over there that were being treated in an American military hospital in Germany. I didn't engage in the charitable side at that time or in the mental health side at that time. I just was paying attention to the file as it related to Canada.
Right.
And then I carried on in my political career. That was up until the federal election of 2011. I ran my last campaign in that year, and we lost by about 1,000 votes. And Scarborough East, and I had to tell a 16-year member of Parliament that he's no longer employed. He was defeated, and that was it for me. So I said, I was like, I've had enough of this. It's been a joy of my professional life, but it may be on to something else after that. And talk about the trials and tribulations of just going with your gut and not having a plan. Well, there was no plan for me we did not plan on a 6-term reelected member of Parliament to lose. Usually They go out on their own. And when the leader of the official opposition, Michael Ignatieff, lost his seat a few ridings over, I thought, we have a chance to lose this. And that means I don't have a job the next day. Which is what happened. Anyway, I decided to take a little bit of rest after that. And then that was in May of 2011. And then in the fall of 2011, I took the summer off. Mm-hmm. There was a provincial election, and a friend of mine was running in the same riding provincially, Tracy McCharles. Right. And he called in Pickering, Scarborough East.
Now, was Tracy not a UTSC alum?
I think she may have been, but I got to... So which was cool, the first full circle back to UTSC was I was hired by, my first job out of UTSC was by the member of Parliament that encompassed UTSC. And then in losing that job federally and going on, and then Tracy wins the election in the same riding provincially in the same year and calls and says, Scott, I ran a campaign in Whitby where I was living at the time against Christine Elliott, and knowing we weren't going to win that one. And anyway, Tracy ended up winning a couple of ridings over in Pickering, and she had all this exempt ministerial staff running her campaign. And she called me the day after she won, and it sounded like she had lost. I said, Tracy, what's wrong? She said, well, you won, congratulations. She said, yeah, but I'm answering my own constituency telephone. Well, why? Well, I have no team, I have no staff, because everything was run out of, the exempt staff from all these ministries and so on that don't run or function the same way when you're in the middle of an election. So can you give me a hand, and what am I doing next? What's the process? So I said, I'll go give you a hand. So I was hired by Tracy McCharles, MPP for Pickering Scarborough East. We did some wonderful things. We were hugely engaged in the Pan Am Games, because the development of that took place under my time there. Tracy and I had successfully lobbied the province to get the Don Valley Parkway renamed the Route of Heroes off the 401. Did lots of things with the Legion there on Lawson Road. that was where the original sign for that Route of Heroes is currently sitting. Yeah. Tons of work with the Tony Stacey Center and the veterans side of the wing at the Tony Stacey Center. It was just a great time. So that took me to Queen's Park. So I was on the next chapter of my post UTSC journey, following my gut again, without expecting to, not having a job interview, not going through this multifaceted hiring process. Just next thing I knew, I was walking up the front steps of Queen's Park, starting a new chapter of my life, 4 months or 5 months removed from being unemployed. Yeah. So what's
the lesson there, I guess, is that, every now and then you do have to have, I imagine you did a bit of reflection, and that was probably good time for you, those 4 months as well, but it was probably worrisome a little bit. Well,
Yeah, I
nice.
had just bought my first condo in Whitby at the lake. I was thinking, I thought things were going to end up a little bit more balanced that process, because not long after that, as I say, it is wild when your job is dependent on the wills and the wishes of the electorate, which is such a fascinating thing to be part of. It's really cool until it's not. Until you have Shred-it coming up to the office to throw all your files that you've worked on for the last 4 years into a box.
Oh,
Um, but anyway, no, it was really cool. And I just kind of felt that it was the right next step for me. And to take that opportunity with Tracy to leverage my federal experience to do it, at a different level and work within the province. And we kind of set a goal together, myself and Tracy, to say, I'm not looking for another 10 years of doing this provincially. But I would like to see us succeed and maybe get into cabinet and
yeah.
give me a hand in doing that and build a bit of a plan strategically to do that. And we were successful. So she was appointed the Minister of Children and Youth Services in the Wynne government.
Yep.
So we spent some time started my foray in the mental health world then, because it was the Children's Aid Societies. Well, our files, it was a Children and Youth Services ministry is a brutal file, very difficult. Every day my phone would ring and there'd be a parent with an autistic child that the parents were at wit's end, and they said they were going to literally drop their children's off at the doorstep of the legislature to care for them, because the care in the province is so inadequate. You walk into a Children's Aid Society, I mean, very, very difficult file, but I fell in love with the mental health fell in love with the concept of mental health, the impact, the socioeconomic impact of the realities in our province, and wanted to spend time focusing on that. So that was really the beginnings of my mental health journey that has led me, into the psychology side of things and where I am today. So I'll pause there.
No, I think that's very cool. I'm enjoying this story. This is great.
Yeah.
So you've got me like, oh, what's the next chapter
What's
now?
the next chapter? Yeah, well, I mean, that's it. And the next chapter was having paid attention to this sapper, Mike McTagg Wounded Warrior Fund way back when in Ottawa as a result of Mike's injury in 06, my friend's Daryl's death in 07, watching that little fund kind of do its thing and send comfort items overseas. And then, of course, everything was winding down in terms of Canada's operations in Afghanistan. And in 2012 and 13, it was the same time that the country was hit with the rise of the invisible injury, operational stress, post-traumatic stress disorder, losing more veterans who served in Afghanistan to suicide than those that were killed in theater. So I was paying a lot of attention to that all the way along. And then I got a call from the board chair at the time of this.
I almost want to stop you there just for a moment and to let that sort of sink in, because even for me too, that we lost more to suicide. So just, to kind of think that through. Yes, enough people were in enough harm's way to actually be killed. But for every person that was killed, there was probably a bunch of other people that were right there in harm's way that may have survived the moment, but may not have survived the incident.
And we kind of use the term that they may have made it home, but they didn't make it all the way home. And, and there's a huge difference in that analogy, in that they're still very much present in the trauma with what they watched, what they witnessed, what they were part of over their tours, and can't just their inability to separate and process, close those loops psychologically hasn't been properly provided to them, which is from a psychological perspective and the work we do now needs to happen in order to actually process through a traumatic injury. Yeah. So we were, to this day, I mean, we're losing uniformed service members to suicide. Just this week, we've lost another RCMP member, a Winnipeg police officer, to suicide in the last 48 hours. This is in a way its own pandemic, not taking anything away from what's happening in the civilian population, of course, but realizing and recognizing that this is happening as a result of one's service to the country.
Right.
Bestows a bit of a different conversation that needs to be had around that.
Yeah, which I mean, I think is a reason why, both you and I are also working with police departments a little bit as well, because we think of wounded warriors in that wartime situation. Of course, that's the stereotypical thing, but exactly what you just said, people who are putting themselves in danger for the service of us, and then who have to live with, the experiences that we are, in a sense, or that they are in our proxy to some extent. We have the luxury of saying, you go deal with that stuff we don't want to deal with. And then they come back with needing support for what they've been through. And I think, you and I both know how important their service is. And I think it's very cool that you're there to be on the front lines for them when they need it.
Yeah, and it was really, if you ever would have told me even when I was working at Queen's Park that I would, be here doing this, I wouldn't have believed it. It took a random phone call from the board chair at the time saying that the organization's been wound down in its initial form from this fund to send support overseas, and that we were going to now very much pursue a domestic mandate here in Canada to support the psychological health and wellness of our veterans at the time, because of what was happening. And so they're looking for an executive director to lead it. So I sat down with Tracy, and we had just got into the C-suite, if you will, of the cabinet position. And I had my office at Bay and Wellesley, looking over. It was just everything. It was really cool. I had never been in the ministerial side of federal government before. I, was hoping to, didn't get that opportunity. And so here I was, and it was like, and I remember Tracy looking at me, I'll never forget it. And she would smile if she was in the room. And I said, I'm leaving you now to go and take on this role with this little Sapper Wounded Warrior Fund. And showed her the website, and she go like, Scott, that's really great. It's, really a higher calling, wonderfully purposed, but like, are you sure you want to leave this? Like you're in the OPS, the Ontario Public Service, like, we just got you the corner, like, and I, without hesitation, and to this day I say it without hesitation, I said, thank you very much for the opportunity to serve with you. I'm going to go on and do this. And I ended up in the back of an orthodontist office in Whitby, Ontario here, with a laptop, a cell phone, and a bunch of old grandparents' furniture. And I remember saying to myself, what the hell did I just do? Because I thought there was even more behind this organization at the time than there was.
Right.
But there really wasn't. And it was like, okay, so I guess the moral of the story for all you students out there is there's certain points in your life where you realize that you can only go up, or take something upward. And that was that time in my life where I thought, I'm on the floor here. I'm on the floor. So now what? And that's where I was at in 2013 going, I'm now in the not-for-profit sector. I have to rely on fundraising to do what we want to do. Mm-hmm. Where's the role of the NGO space in Canada between the Department of National Defence and Veterans Affairs Canada and all these stakeholders? And I have never spent 1 hour in the not-for-profit sector, and now I'm leading a not-for-profit. So there was no textbook. I couldn't run back to Professor Jordan's and the team at University of Toronto to get some help. There is no handbook. It's just revert back to those earlier days I was sharing with you about walking into that riding association meeting. And here I was walking into, big functions on Bay Street, the top of the BMO Tower, where there was veterans events taking place, introducing myself as the executive director of this little fund. And just stepping way outside of my comfort zone, in that I was in a brand new sector that I'd never spent an hour in. Yeah. I've never worn a uniform. How am I going to be perceived? Right. The psychological impact of that was really hard to process through, and to get myself to feel comfortable enough to speak and present and go forward with. But I thought, I got to surround myself and build a team here that will insulate that and those emotions and those feelings, and let me do the development work on building an organization. That's what I did.
I mean, another great linking to this sort of group work idea, and often in university it is contrived and it doesn't quite work out the way we want. I do try to tell my students part of that, what makes group work bad is what makes it good, trying to negotiate all that stuff and learning those skills. But that idea too of, being in a situation where you might have perception of your own lacks, let's say, things that you're not good at, but being able and comfortable to find a team and build a team that together you have everything you need to make the organization. It's no one of us, I think, even can pull off almost anything of substance alone. Maybe a few people.
You're never going to know, it's not always about being the smartest in the room or the best and the brightest or the master of something. It's just about, do something, well, work your rear end off to be successful at whatever is driving and fueling your passion and desire to be productive at. Surround yourself with wonderful people that all kind of are on the same, they're on the same mission and the same
Yeah.
focus.
Yeah.
And build a bit of a plan. And don't, just because you don't have all the answers doesn't mean you can't devise a plan to help, kind of develop a plan to get there and to accomplish something. And you're not going to know it today. And like where Wounded Warriors Canada is today, I would never even been able to sketch it out if I was thinking about it 7 years ago.
Yeah.
But it's all part of that plan. So don't
Yeah.
try to
So
do too much. Don't.
you talk about the Wounded Warriors like it's a little rinky dink, and maybe it was in 2013, but I think of the Wounded Warriors as one of the great badges of pride of our country, as an example of actually following through on the responsibility we have to these people that we've put into
Yeah,
harm's way. And I think of it as a fantastic organization. I now realize you're the one that brought it from 2013 to what it is today, which
yeah.
is
I
amazing.
mean, I realized quickly that I wasn't going to be able to do this by myself. And it's part of, just don't, again, just don't, like, look at things realistically, look at
Yeah.
things practically. Don't try to look at things always just, in some abstract ideological, this is so complicated sense. Like, get down to the practical elements of what you're doing and and where you want to be and how you're going to get there.
Yeah.
And it will start to sort itself out. And so the first thing I did was I went to Ottawa and I booked a meeting with General Romeo Dallaire, who I worked with a lot on files when he was appointed to the Senate.
Yeah.
When I was in Ottawa, and I asked him if he would take a leap of faith and join this little organization with me as our national patron. And I could hear the staff on the other side of his big padded door in the Senate office going, "No, don't take something else on, Romeo. Don't take something else on." And he ended up agreeing to do it. So we announced, I was in the back, there was this little Canadian Institute for Military and Veterans Health Research Forum that's based out of Queens. And he announced it as he was the keynote speaker in front of every academic and researcher in the military and veterans health world that he had joined this, what I had created, well, the name we had changed to Wounded Warriors Canada. And he had joined Wounded Warriors Canada as national patron. You could hear the whole room kind of gasp going, "Wow, what's that?" And, just put these pieces in place one day at a time,
Yeah.
starting with him. Then we moved on to another couple, Lieutenant Colonel who joined us and brought us the concepts that PTSD and operational stress injuries are more than just an individual injury psychologically. They affect the spouses, the partners, the kids, the whole thing. And just we started to build the organization, really started to organically develop when you had the right pieces in the right place and you weren't forcing things. And we were, able to play a bit of a long game with this whole conversation to where that's really how we got here today.
Let me unpack that a little bit too, because the first time Scott and I spoke, I remember this phone call
Yeah,
very well, and you kind of said something that I don't think you said it this way. This is how it registered in my head, which is PTSD is contagious, which I didn't really, think of it that way. We think of PTSD as, yeah, the individual was in that situation and their hippocampus stored these memories and connected to the emotionality and all that. But you got me thinking, what if my dad had come back and had PTSD? So he was a UN peacekeeper. He was in those days when our army wasn't quite as active. But if he had come back and if my father had just occasionally, had a PTSD episode and I didn't know when that was going to happen, and eventually I can see how I would start to become anxious. I would start to fear the kind of triggers, and I might start to react to those kinds of triggers in that same way. So suddenly the whole family is living with the disease.
Yeah, well, absolutely. We quickly realized it. I mean, it was brought to us right off the start with General Dallaire saying, "I'll join this organization in this role if you ensure that everything you're doing from a funding perspective to programs is inclusive to, or at least has a lens to the impact of these injuries on the family," because he was himself a father of a veteran
Uh,
who, because of his injuries, which we never diagnosed, but always went on to realize it was a result of his service through post-traumatic stress,
yeah,
was very abusive to him as the children, his mother, drank horribly. These kinds of similar stories that we've heard too many times,
yeah,
and the family suffered immensely. And we see it to this day all across the country. Not only is it just a militaristic kind of reality of war it's not inevitable, it's a consequence of it for some, not all.
yeah,
But we quickly realized, moving forward through our program development and expanding the lens to include family-based care here at Wounded Warriors Canada, that this is also trauma is trauma, and these injuries, once they take hold psychologically, and
yeah,
once they're not being processed psychologically properly, and being closed and processed from a clinical perspective, that the impacts downstream are eerily the same. So we started to hear from first responders everywhere we went in the country around 2016, 17, coming out of the shadow of the Canadian Forces in Canada, because where the PTSD was very much advertised as a military injury, something you receive as a result of serving somewhere overseas. And of course, that's not true either. So it's just myth busting mental health and psychology all over the place. We've been doing is we've been rolling out these programs and developing all this new curriculum across the country, saying like, no, 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 no. It's actually, this has always been here.
Yeah.
Our paramedics, our firefighters, our police officers, our correctional service officers, those that wear the uniform domestically, this has been as much a reality for them in different ways as it's been for anyone that served the country at any part in time in our history. So let's make sure we include them. So we expanded the scope of the mission to Wounded Warriors Canada to include, as you can see in our print there, a fire, the whole umbrella of uniformed service.
Yeah.
Just this encapsulates it all for us. And so we started to really shine light on public safety personnel as well over the last number of years. And now, then it became them, and then it became the individuals, the couples, the spouses. We have a new Warrior Kids division, all these and now most recently, we just launched a program for surviving spouses who have lost their partner either in the line of duty or as a result of death by suicide. Every step we take forward, it almost opens the next door. There's so many gaps and layers within the complexity of mental health and trauma and service that, I'm thankful we're able to drive through those doors and not close them and say we are not able to be helpful. But it's daunting, except the good news of the story is to not leave, I'm a glass half full type person, is there are phenomenal psychologists out there. They want to make a difference. They want to lead this cutting edge curriculum, and we're doing it.
Yeah. I mean, I know we could talk all day.
Oh, yeah.
How long this goes, but I mean, I think one of the sort of take home things that's a warm and fuzzy, I guess, is, the fact that there's somebody in that position who's doing something we're all proud of, and that we think is hugely important, and you're one of us. And you sat in the chairs of the UTSC classroom, and this is, I love how your story is sort of not overly planned, let's say, following your heart, following your passion, finding a way to make things, and now you're in this position that, I mean, you really do make us proud. You make us proud for the country, but you make our campus extremely proud. And I'm so glad I got to meet you. I can't wait to work with you a little bit more.
Come and meet you in person, and hopefully maybe walk into one of your classes and chat with some students, and take questions, and not say a whole lot of anything, but hopefully take questions, because this is the part about this that I miss. These conversations are wonderful, but every time I present on anything, I want to be brief and short with the presentation to really delve into what people are thinking and feeling in the rooms. And that's no different with the students, to have these conversations open and honest, and just hear from them about what a struggle is like, or not struggle, what's life is like as a student right now in 2021, as it was for me in 2008, or from 4 and 3 until 8, for me as a student, coming out into the Great Recession as I did, and now they're coming out, or they're currently thinking of coming out of post-secondary into the global pandemic. I just really can't thank them enough for their strength and their resolve and their I can't imagine what it'd be like right now to be a student. And the good news is take a little bit of my journey as an indicator that it will be okay. We're going to come out of this. Don't have all these preconceived thoughts and notions on much of life outside of university campus and university life, or post-secondary generally, because you really got to get in there with the people and with society at large, and with an employer and a workplace and so on. As you can, Steve, from working at University of Toronto, is so much else happens there, and so much else you're going to have the skill development, the micro skill development, the soft skill development, fundamental tools that when you pair it with what you learn in academics, it makes for a pretty good combination to set you on a successful path coming out of school.
Yeah. So cool. So cool. Man, thank you so much, Scott. We will make that Q&A happen. I love it.
Anytime, I just can't wait to see the campus. I miss it. I had such an amazing time there. It was just never had a bad day. The team, the professors, the small class sizes. I hope they're still relatively small or smaller. Probably not, but I just look forward.
Do you have a professor that comes to mind that made an impression on you? I wonder if there's any that are.
Modris Eckstein.
Yeah, yeah, Modris. I don't know if I'm not positive he's still there, but I know he certainly was. I was there in
Maybe
'95.
your
So I
students
know.
want another book to read. Although I know the answer is no. Get the Rites of Spring by Modris Eckstein. He was my Oh, he was just, I think he was just a phenomenal professor, but he came in almost like you just wouldn't believe that you're at school. Professors for me that I really resonated with was when they took the feeling away that I was in a classroom kind of environment, and we were
Yeah,
having a real world, very practical conversation about life and values and socioeconomics and things that are happening around us that we're going to face when we walk out of the doors at the end of the class,
yeah.
or what have happened in our history that shaped who we are, the situations we're living in. That to me, that's how I kind of gravitated to a prof. And Modris, I could listen to him talk all day too. So that's my guy.
Very cool. Very cool. Excellent, Scott. Thank you. I will let you go for today, but yeah, this is just the beginning of a regular interaction, I think. So I look forward to it very much.
Cheers. Thanks so much for having me.